Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today, I am very excited to say, and very much looking forward to this conversation, is Karen Nyberg, NASA astronaut. I think retired. Is that right? Or just
That's correct.
Okay. And Karen, you can find her on Instagram and Twitter at Astro Karen N for Karen Nyberg. And you can find her on Facebook. If you just type in facebook.com/ all this whole thing is one thing, Astronaut Karen Nyberg, just / Astronaut Karen Nyberg. There she is. And that's Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And her website is KarenNyberg.com. So if you want to find her, there she is. And I think that you're going to enjoy joining us today for this conversation. I got to meet Karen in a really hallowed place in the astronaut conference room. And one of the things about astronauts, and I've talked about this before, we won't go into it right now, but it's actually built in that astronauts are just some of the nicest people on Earth. And that's part of the requirement to get off of Earth and go to the space station and stuff. So that does describe you, Karen. And you were the 50th woman in space, kind of a cool round number. And you were just under 500 people, like less than 500 people had ever been to space when you went to space, and you were the 50th woman. I think that's pretty cool. So I'd love to know, first of all, just welcome. Great to have you.
I'm so happy to be here with you, John.
Thank you. And I'd love to know, a little bit about what that was like. Like, let's just jump into that moment just for excitement's sake, that you're sitting there, like, I don't know, you're about to board the spacecraft. Maybe you're already on board. Like, what was the most heart-pounding moment of that first time?
You know, the whole process, because we do so much training and so many times we get suited up and so many times we practice even the walkout once beforehand and everything. So all of that was, I think my energy was up, but it wasn't like, this heart-pounding moment. And then sitting on the launch pad, we had done that before. And the countdown, and once it gets within a minute, then you're realizing, okay, we're actually going to go. But still at the same time, it's not, there probably is an elevated awareness, but not that huge rush excitement that you would think. Uh-huh. I think for me, it was probably after we got into space and I had a chance to just really reflect on what I had just done. And at that point, I think is when the most emotional or the most memorable really part of it. Yeah.
Where were you at that moment?
I was in the flight deck of the Space Shuttle Discovery. And we had just, I had just finished a task I had to do after we got into orbit. So we were weightless by this time. And I had a very important task, taking pictures of the external tank after it was separated from the shuttle to get pictures just in case foam comes off. And I was very focused on doing that and getting that done properly and correctly. And so it was after that when I had a chance to actually breathe and realize where I was. And like I said, what I had just done. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That's just that must have been such a wild moment. So I think it's really interesting. One of the things that, this is the Speak Like a Leader podcast, and we're always talking about leadership and speaking and communication. And one of the things that I definitely have learned from you all at the astronaut office is the importance of doing it over and over and over, right? Practice. Like you even practice walking out, right?
Right.
Like, and which I think is not as funny as it sounds. I mean, it's because I think people often think, oh, well, I do that all the time, right? Those things they do all the time. But if it really matters and you've got other people depending on you and things, maybe you want to just practice the walkout. Like, I know how to walk, but let's just practice the walkout, even something like that deserves a run through.
Well, that's right. And there are so many moving parts with that because there are so many people involved, and you just, every person might think that they have their part down, but it really needs to just, work together with everybody's piece and everybody's part.
Yeah.
And it's important to go through that and make sure that you really do have an understanding of what you're supposed to be doing. And you really do have an understanding of what others are supposed to be doing, so that if you see theirs go off track, you know how to alter what you're doing to make it work.
Yeah. That's one of the other big things I think about being an astronaut is that there's this, you get all the attention, right? And from the outside, you kind of get all the glory and, everything. And gosh, it almost makes me cry to think about how aware every single one of you are of how much you're dependent on others. And I think that's such a really important thing for everybody to really get. Like, how I would say it is, there are these people that I think that they're self-made. There are these people out there that think they somehow did something by themselves that's a big deal. That never, ever, ever happens. And look at some of the coolest, most, lauded people on the planet, the NASA astronauts. There's not one single one of you that even begins to entertain the idea that you're something special. You all just get to do something special because thousands of people are willing to support you, right?
Yeah, there are so many people along every step of the way. I mean, from the time I was little until through college and through graduate school and through working as an engineer, and then getting into the astronaut office and all of that. Yes, there are people all the way along that have done things that have enabled a person to get where they're going, for sure.
Yeah. So there you are, having that moment on the flight deck of the space shuttle and Discovery, right?
Discovery, yeah.
And what if you were there having that moment and like I could somehow show up for a second and say, hey, how did all this start? Think about that for a second, Karen. Where does your mind go?
Well, it kind of did go there, actually, because I remember thinking, here I am. I did this because this is a dream I had since I was a little girl back in, I don't know exactly when, but it was the mid to late 70s when I started thinking I wanted to be an astronaut, when I was probably 8, 9, 10 years old.
Yeah.
And started telling people that's what I was going to do. And
see your future, be your future, Karen. It's like they say in Ghostbusters.
My sister admits that she thought it was cute when I said I wanted to be an astronaut, because doesn't everybody, don't all little kids at some point say they want to be an astronaut? But I really kept that with me through the whole, it was this goal, and I did, but I tried to make myself understand that the chances were really slim that I would, but that shouldn't stop me from reaching for that goal,
Yeah. That's awesome. So, and I just want to give a shout out that it's when we're recording this, it's early March, and that's Women's History Month. So, this is probably a softball, but do you think that any of those 49 female astronauts that went before you made a difference for you?
Oh, absolutely. Especially, we just talked about when I decided I wanted to be an astronaut. That time frame was exactly when NASA picked their first female astronauts. And it was a class in 1978. And, I don't remember exactly seeing that or hearing that, but I can't imagine that did not have a huge impact on me. I'm sure I saw it on the news and if this is fine, I see that I'm seeing myself in them and seeing that I can do it. It's so important for people to see themselves in a role, to realize that it's a realistic goal. And then all along the way, that all the astronauts, and also the female astronauts that were mothers that flew on Space Shuttle and kind of broke that mold,
Yeah.
And it's just everybody along the way that did those firsts,
Yeah.
I think was really important. And frankly, then by the time when we were here, it's to me, it wasn't a big deal to be a female astronaut, where some of the first really had to, work through things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what you say in other conversations that we've had is like, yeah, I was the 50th woman, but like, let's stop counting. Let's just get more women up there. Right.
Yes. Before my flight, I would get asked that all the time. And the NASA PAO was really stressing that because that was a great point. Yeah. She's the 50th woman in space. And I remember one of the times answering a question at a press conference, and like, I just really want to get to the point where we don't need to count that anymore,
Yeah.
And I think we're getting there. We'll get there. It's getting, more and more.
Well, part of the deal is we're base 10, right? So 50 is kind of a big deal. So
it is a
if
big
we were
deal.
base 4, it'd be no big deal, right?
Exactly. Then only if I'd been the, 64th.
Yeah. So, Megan is on the next Dragon, right?
Dragon, yes. Megan's flying, and I think the launch date's in April right now. And so I'm so excited for her because her first flight was on Space Shuttle, so she did not go to the space station. They went to Hubble.
Wow.
And so she gets to go to the space station for the first time, and I'm so excited for her. I can't wait to see her working up there.
Yeah, I'm excited for her too. I'm excited for her too. She too is just one of the most wonderful people I've met. I'm so happy. Like I'm retweeting like crazy everything that mentions her.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I think I would love to hear from you is because you said mom in space. Like, what was that like? What? Because I'm not a mom. I'll never be a mom. I imagine that there were things that you thought from that perspective that were impactful for you. What were some of the things around that aspect of being in space?
Well, making the decision to go in the first place, since my mission, my second mission, when I had Jack and he was 3, it was going to be almost 6 months long. And that's different than a shuttle mission that is a couple of weeks long. Now the risk, you're still taking the same kind of risk, but at a shorter mission, but it's just longer time away from home and a longer time for something risky to happen. And when I was offered the opportunity to take that flight, I talked to Doug a lot about it and then just realized that, yes, that is what I should be doing, because I did the one shot on flight on shuttle. And when I landed after that, I really felt like I wanted to do it again, needed to do it again, needed more time in space. And I'm so glad I made that decision. And and again, it was with help, because I knew that we had a wonderful nanny at home, because, to be with Jack during the days when Doug was working. My mother-in-law was, stepped in, took Jack to her place for a month at a time. And so without that help and without a husband who was willing to be the solo dad for that period of time, it was able to, and I felt comfortable then. I knew that Jack was going to be well taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good. You do have a fairly understanding husband in that realm, right?
Yeah. Yes, I do.
I mean, and you had to be pretty understanding for him to be, the first human cargo on Dragon, right? Like,
oh, I wouldn't call him cargo.
But I mean, this is
the test pilot you're talking about.
Right. But I mean, this is the first time that there was a human being on that ship, right?
Right.
And he had to be there. He was a test pilot. And and I know I was calling him cargo to try and be funny here. But
I know you were. I know exactly where
it.
you're going with it, but I had to be funny back.
Good. So that must have been a little bit hard for you. A little bit.
I think that I knew that he would be making a decision based on the risk with more knowledge than I had, because he'd spent so much time with SpaceX.
Yeah.
And I mean, I honestly think that he felt more safe and that on there than even the shuttle after it had flown so many times. The shuttle wasn't any more safe.
Yeah.
Was it less safe? I don't know, but it wasn't any more safe.
Yeah.
And so that part of it, I don't think was the part of flying on a vehicle for the first time, because SpaceX had been flying cargo for so long.
Yeah.
They had been flying a similar rocket for several flights successfully. And gone to the International Space Station several times with a cargo vehicle successfully. So the risk part of it wasn't any more than any other rocket or space vehicle. Yeah. Even if it was the first flight.
It's just dad's on a really, really extended business trip.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and sometimes the first flight of something, I would argue, is even safer than later on because,
people don't get complacent, right?
Complacency can set in after a while. Yeah.
I have a sticker right over there that I can look right above my monitor that says complacency kills. It's from EOD, explosive ordnance disposal.
Yep.
So, that's a good point. So there you were now having made that choice, knowing you had good backup, Jack was going to be okay. What was it like being up there and knowing everybody else was down there? And what was that like?
Time went very fast. And it's also fairly easy for us in this job to compartmentalize when we need to. There were a few times one time when Jack was having a hard time sleeping, and he was an extremely good sleeper. So for him to wake up in the middle of the night and want his grandma it was extremely unusual. And so he was at my in-laws and that happened. And when Doug told me that, it just was like, and it was around the length, I think it was about 5 weeks into my mission, about the longest I'd ever been away from him before was about 5 weeks on a training trip. And so, and I wanted nothing more than to just go and rock him at that time. But in general, I got to speak with them on a video every weekend and called my husband every day on the phone. And I made a video on my iPad every single day saying goodnight to Jack that I would then email to Doug to show him. And I got a lot of pictures and videos sent up to me. I mean, our nanny would even take a camera after she took him to get his hair cut. She would take him to the dollar store and he got to pick out a couple toys. And so I'd even get videos of him trying to pick out toys, which now are priceless. I go back and look at him now and it's so cute to see.
Bet. Oh my gosh.
So I felt very connected during that whole time.
That's good. Well, and you, I know that now I run outside every time the ISS goes over, and it's dark and there's not too much cloud cover and I wave, and on your Facebook page, there's that picture of you in the cupola. Is that how you?
The cupola, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The cupola. Yeah. So you got a chance to fly over them and look down, right? Did they run out and wave? Did you ever wave from the cupola?
I don't remember if I waved, but I definitely said hi. Hey there. Yeah. It's and I know Doug tells the story. They were up at the St. Lawrence River. That's the one time that I distinctly remember thinking about them while I passed over. And they were, Doug's parents had a resort. And so there were a bunch of people outside and, they said, hey, the space station's coming over there and Jack's mom is up there. And right when it was silent and everybody's watching, he said, hi, mommy. So everybody's, how sweet is that?
Well, that's so sweet. It makes me think about what we're going through right now with this global pandemic. I wrote an article, based on a conversation that you and I had at the kind of much nearer the beginning of this, so almost a year ago, where I said, we're all in the same storm. And I acknowledge we're not in the same boat.
Right.
But we are all in the same storm. And this is our opportunity, I think, or it could be something we could make into an opportunity to have that experience of the overview effect that you and your colleagues talk about when you get to actually go up there and be in space and see the planet in its entirety and get that there ain't nothing else in the neighborhood,
Right.
So, what do you think about that as a comparison? And what do you think about the overview effect in general? And what is it that, what are some things we could learn from you about that?
Well, the overview effect is very real and very strong. And there's a lot of aspects to it, I think, to be honest. One is understanding that Earth is our only home and that it has a really, really tiny little atmosphere. And we really need to protect it because everything that we need is right there. Yeah. And we don't know of anything within traveling distance to help us out if we lose this.
Yeah.
And then the aspect of realizing that, I've heard a lot of people say Earth is the spaceship and we're all the crew. And we're all in this together. And that's exactly what this pandemic is showing us, that we're no different. Every corner of the world can be affected the same way because we're all the same.
Yeah.
And one of the things I got out of the overview effect was feeling more empathy for people that I don't know and people that I can't understand the situation they're living in because I've never been there. And I don't know, I haven't been to their country. I haven't been to their city. I don't know what it's like where they live. And so that sense of empathy was increased for sure. But we're all in this together. We're all the same. We have a lot more in common than we do different. That's for sure.
Yeah. It's so wild because I think about standing there looking at a world map, I can do that.
Right.
What a crazy experience to be going, what is it? Like 75,000 kilometers?
17,500 miles per hour. I don't remember what it is in kilometers. I have to do the math.
17,500 miles an hour over the world map, but it's the real thing. Like that's not a map. That is the territory, but it kind of looks like a map, but that's the actual territory. And there's that city that you've never been to, but you've been this close, but never been to.
Right.
That's a crazy cool experience. So Karen, what are some of the things because I think some of the people who listen to this are entrepreneurs and some of the people who listen to this work at large organizations and run large organizations. And I think the common theme is that everybody that listens is willing to take on their leadership and is constantly looking to be better at that and make a difference more and more with that. What are some of the things that you would say are what are some of the leadership lessons that you've learned through your time as an astronaut?
Actually, one of the biggest things was actually before I was an astronaut. When I was choosing graduate schools, and I went to the University of Texas and I met with Dr. Ken Diller. He was the chair of the mechanical engineering department at the time. And I went and had a little conversation with him. And I walked out of there feeling like he knew. I told him that my ultimate goal was to be an astronaut. I wanted to get my doctorate and do all this. But he really showed this confidence in me. Like talking to him, it was very much, okay, well then if you're going to do that, then we want to do this and this. And through the whole, so I ended up having him as my graduate advisor.
Yeah.
And he was like that all the time. It was always showing confidence in me, and maybe I not in myself, but he would show it. And it was so much easier for me to be confident in myself and to do the things I needed to do because he was always confident in me. And he showed it and it was just natural for him in the way he talked and the way he,
that's so beautiful. I love that. My person like that is Melinda Richter, who's the global head of JLabs now. And it makes me think of a TED talk by Benjamin Zander on music and passion. And I really recommend, if you haven't seen Ben Zander's TED talk, just go to TED and type Benjamin Zander and watch that puppy. But one of the things he says is that it is a requirement that leaders believe in the people they're leading, right? Like, I have a dream, but I'm not really sure you're up to it,
Right.
That's not going to work, right?
Yep.
So that believing in people, I think, is one of the most generous leadership gifts that anybody could give to another human being. And
Absolutely.
That's really cool that you identify that as a major place in your trajectory.
Oh yeah, absolutely. He's a wonderful man.
That's awesome. So, what would you say to somebody? Because I can imagine times when I've been sitting and listening to somebody and just going, well, okay, they had it all worked out. Like you wanted to be an astronaut since you were like 7 or 8, and then you just went and did it. What would you say to somebody who might be thinking, well, good for her. She's got something I don't have, what would you say to that person?
I probably do not have what you don't have. Well, we might have different things, but everybody has something. I was very goal oriented, obviously, like you said, persistent to an extent too, but I also tried really hard to understand when a goal I had was unrealistic and when a goal I had was actually within the bounds of, I was not somebody to accept poor grades.
Right.
And I had long study nights.
Yep.
I remember sitting in the common area of my dorm at 3 a.m. as some people were coming home from wherever they were, whatever they were doing. Yeah. And I was studying, but I didn't study all the time. I also gave myself, maybe one evening to, when I was really busy, one evening to relax and have some fun. But I also visualized myself along the way too. I visualized when I was an undergraduate student, I would visualize myself in graduate school and visualize myself having received my doctorate and visualize myself, and I think in high school, I would do the same thing for college. And I kind of just visualized each next step. And maybe that helped me then as I was picking where to go and talking to people, maybe that helped. And then when I was in graduate school and finished there and started as an engineer at NASA, I visualized myself as an astronaut and that it can't hurt obviously to do that. But I think, maybe that set me up a little bit, just in believing that I could do it.
Yeah. It reminds me of one of the bigger breakthroughs of my life, Karen, for myself was when it dawned on me that what I was thinking about all the time was what I didn't want. I don't want a 9-to-5 job. I don't want to feel like a cog. I don't want to, marry somebody who's going to ignore me once we have kids. I was like, I don't know what I was doing in there, but and then one day it dawned on me, like, that's like negative visualization. And that's what I'm thinking about a lot of the time. I need to stop that, Right. So I would catch myself in that moment, do the whole, this wasn't because of Tony Robbins, but I know he says, tap yourself on the wrist gently to change state or whatever, remind yourself. And so I would tap myself gently on the wrist and then think about what I did want. And it was a turning point. That making that choice and starting to notice that was a turning point for me. So I think that's actually really, really great advice, especially for somebody who's, who has something they want, who is, maybe in the earlier stages of their career or whatever. Make sure you're visualizing yourself at the next step and visualize what you really want. Don't spend your time like I was doing thinking about all the negative stuff. That just gets you more negative stuff.
Yeah. It just brings you down.
Yeah. Yeah. So what else is, how about a little like astronaut inside baseball stuff? Like what's something that we just, and let me start, but I want you to go actually, no, you start and then I'll remember what I was going to say, cause I don't want to influence where you go. What's a little astronaut inside baseball, anything that you could share with us?
Oh gosh. I might need more of a prompt.
What's something that we just don't know and might never suspect, about being an astronaut? Like one thing that was sort of interesting to me, and I guess people talk about this and some people know it probably more than I do, but like, I thought it was really interesting that you did a lot of work underwater because it's kind of the closest we can get to space, right? And like less gravity and, no air. So how about this spinning around test? Did you throw up? Like
we did not have that. We don't do that. They actually do something similar in Russia, but
okay.
Well, we do the centrifuge.
Uh-huh.
And I did that in Russia, and I think they're bringing it back now with we stopped doing it for shuttle because the G's were so low coming in.
Okay.
So we didn't need to do that training, but for the capsules again, they're training. One thing just on a more personal level that, I find very interesting is so many people assume that I'm extremely knowledgeable about the solar system and other worlds and anything space.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I'm not an astrophysicist. I'm not, I'm not a planetary scientist. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I worked in low Earth orbit on the International Space Station. And so sometimes I'll get these questions about black holes and about, and I think there are probably a lot of astronauts. Well, there are some that come from those fields, and there are some that I think their hobbies might be reading about that stuff or learning about that. But I don't know. I'm not an expert on any of that. In fact, my son Jack probably knows more than I do about that now. But it's always interesting to me that people assume that anything with the word space in it, that an astronaut is automatically an expert in.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the things that I think is interesting as an entrepreneur or as a corporate leader, the team of astronauts, as I was exposed to y'all, I think you probably would agree with me. You're a very diverse bunch. And
we really are. Yes.
Right. And that's one of the conversations happening now in a big way, but that's been the way it is for the astronauts, I think, for a while. Very diverse backgrounds, diverse interests, men, women, like that diversity to the team is a big key. And I think that's what NASA's been looking for and hiring for, if you will.
That's right. I think a lot of times we talk about diversity and people automatically think male, female, ethnicity, but there's also, diversity of thought, which comes from the way you were raised and the way what you studied and that sort of thing. And that's just as important to look at that. And when we hire astronaut classes, we look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's cool. So what are some of the things I think that you're now retired, which is amazing because
it's been almost a year.
Yeah. That's March
last year. I don't know where the time went.
I mean, you look like you're 20. How did you retire so early? So what are you up to now? What are you thinking about? What is Astro Karen off to next?
Well, my entire life, I was interested in art. I used to draw a lot when I was little. You could not find me in front of the television without a sketch pad and just doodling and I would craft a lot and sew. My mom taught me to sew when I was really little, and I sewed clothes for myself all through high school. And so, in fact, my grandmother at one point when I was younger even said to me, you need to follow your God-given talent and go into art and, engineering, But I had to explain, I work a really good heat transfer equation. I've got a skill there too.
Yeah, there you go. Well, it's not like talent. They're totally different, those art and science are like
intertwingle. So art has been a hobby of mine my whole life. And I decorated my son's nursery before he was born. And then we redecorated. And I do everything from making the curtains to the quilts, to the bed skirts, to the throw rug, to painting it, to making art pieces for the room. So I've always liked doing that. So my point is I'm trying to get into more of that stuff. And I've been working on textile arts and hopefully doing a lot more in the area of fabrics and that sort of thing. I'm also interested in earth sustainability and conservation and that area. I've started working with a company called Awesome Tex they developed a process to take used clothing, because we have a horrible clothing waste problem on Earth.
Yeah.
And turn it into usable yarns to make fabric. And so, and that's just the sort of thing, fabric, and the sustainability portion of it. So those are kind of the things I've been, pursuing, and have some good opportunities coming up soon. So I'm excited to tell you about them when I can, but,
that's awesome. So you'll put more information out about that on your Facebook account and on your Twitter thing the minute that it's, because like I want some. I'm ready. I'm in. Let me, just tell me when.
Good stuff.
And I also, I would love to give Jack's YouTube channel a plug. I think we should. How do people find that? It's really cool. It's about dinosaurs and
other animals and other nature. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And Johnny loves it. So how do they find that? It's youtube.com/
It's Packy Jack is his channel name. Packy, Pachy, Jack. Packy is the beginning of Pachyrhinosaurus, his favorite dinosaur.
That's awesome.
And it means thick. I believe Pachyrhinosaurus is thick-nosed dinosaur. And so that's how he named it. And he he's kind of taken a little bit of a hiatus here with school going on. But yeah, he's amazing. He started liking dinosaurs. His first favorite book before he was one was a dinosaur book. And he's loved them ever since. And he's 11 now. And we kind of kept wondering, when is he going to pass the dinosaur phase? And he's still loves dinosaurs. So who knows? Maybe we do have a paleontologist on our hand, but he's a wealth. I mean, the information he has, the things he remembers, he's got tons of dinosaur encyclopedias and he just remembers things. And then in his channel, he talks about different and kind of gives little lessons on various and modern creatures as well.
And it's all very engaging. I think it's very engaging, and he's clearly passionate about it, and it's fun and it's exciting. So I've been enjoying it. So Packy Jack, PACHYJACK.
Yep.
Packy Jack. So if you knew that the whole audience of Speak Like a Leader show was listening for a few minutes, just on any level, anything important, what would you like to say to people that are out there, that care, that are interested, that are up to something? What would you like them to know? Kind of a big question.
It is a big question because there's a lot of paths this could go. There's a lot of paths it could take. Going on the path of partly overview effect and partly Earth sustainability. One of and the part I talked about, clothing trash. I've realized more and more through the years how wasteful we are, it starts. It's at the home level all the way up through large corporation level, and just little things. When buying water bottles, when we could, if you don't like the water from the tap, filter it and fill up our own water bottles, and we just. It's for some reason we've gotten into this habit that we just throw things away. Well, we'll just throw it away. But when you see the Earth as a whole, we're not throwing, it's still in our home. We just throw it.
There's no away.
There's no away. It just goes to another part of our home. And, and the same thing with, and I'm guilty of this, cheap clothes, cheap toys. And I remember somebody one time saying, they bought their grandkids these cheap toys from one of the convenience stores in the area, and telling her daughter, well, if it breaks, that's okay, just throw it away. It was cheap, that's our attitude. And well, so it's not going to be in your house anymore, but it's going to be in a landfill somewhere. And when we have a billion people doing that it's just so wasteful. And so I just think we need to start thinking of as the Earth is our home, not just the house we live in, and that it, and some things are recycled, but I question how much actually gets recycled that we put in the bin.
I would like to potentially introduce you to a former guest of this show. His name's Peter, and he is Peter Lacey, and he's at Accenture in charge of their what is it called? Now that I need to know it, I can't remember it, but basically the circular economy. And one of the things that one of the people I was talking to at Accenture was saying is that our buying habits have been really impacted by the coronavirus and this whole lockdowns and all that kind of stuff. He thought that fast fashion was on its last legs. Like really didn't think that was going to be something that was going to have the place that it has had.
Mm-hmm.
And that, and I thought this was really interesting because it has to be played out all the way to really, I think, get it. But he said there was going to be a return of luxury items. And by that, what he meant was not necessarily what I heard about luxury items, but items that you would buy that would keep working, that would last, that would be finely made, that you would pass on to your children, you know? Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, you know, like this freaking stupid timer thing, like that turns the stuff off and on that I bought at Home Depot that's super cheap and plastic, like worked for a year and just stopped working. I'm so sick of that. I don't want to buy anything like that anymore. I'm just so frustrated. And I think that hearing what you're saying, hearing what they're saying, hearing my feelings, I think that there is something that it might not take hold by itself, but there's something there to be grabbed onto and fueled and to make a change. Absolutely. Like what you're talking about, you know? Absolutely. Mindsets need to change at all levels, I think, for that to happen. But hopefully it will, and hopefully not too gradually. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, it's interesting because gradually is kind of done. Like we're sort of up against it here, I think. Yeah. So tell me again, if I can take you back and, you know, we're kind of pursuing my things now, if that's okay, but like go back up there in the International Space Station, if you will, and look back out at Earth and say a little more about that, how much atmosphere we actually have and how close anything habitable is. And, you know, like, will you paint that picture again and go a little more in depth on it? Yeah, the way you notice it when looking at the Earth, of course, the colors are so vibrant, and you know, you could Google any Earth photos from space station, and there's so many beautiful ones to look at. But what we notice is that along the horizon, that really, really pretty bright blue that's just about, you know, I don't even know on a picture. Yeah, it gives me goosebumps. Yeah. And that's the atmosphere, and that's all the air that we have, and it just looks so thin compared to the entire Earth. There's not much of that, right? And there's not throwing a bunch of, Yeah. And it's really noticeable with the colors. It's, you know, some of the pictures you see it more than others, depending on the height of the sun and that sort of thing. But it really is noticeable. And how about fresh water? Did you ever think about that from up there? You know, I never thought about that, but my gosh, we have a lot of ocean. Yeah, there's a lot of fresh water. There are times, you know, I would look out the window and we just started crossing the Pacific Ocean, and that was the longest time is trying to get, you know, just getting across the Pacific Ocean. Yeah. Dude, now imagine doing that in an outrigger canoe. That's not 17,500 miles an hour, baby. That's not even close. Oh, that would be, I don't know how you would ever expect it to end. Wow. That's cool. Yeah. Boy, the journey across the Pacific, huh? That stood out for you. But I never really thought about the ratio of fresh water to salt water, and there's not a lot. Yeah. What were some other big, like not big, but other notable things that stood out for you as you like traversed the Earth, like from sunrise to sunset, like 16 times in a day? Yeah. I would really start to notice continents, you know, the colors of the deserts in Africa. I mean, it was very clear as we were coming up. Yeah. You didn't have to see the shape of the continent. That's Africa. Yeah. The colors of Australia, kind of the red, the, you know, Midwest United States, there's not a lot of dramatic views, but it's very, you can tell it's farmland, and you can tell I could just tell where we were, you know? Yeah. The kind of the Central Asia area, the mountains and the lakes, there'd be very blue lakes in the mountains, and you know, then South America was very
obvious we were coming along the west coast of South America with the mountains and the glaciers. And so that part of it, I really started to just recognize Earth by the colors and, where we were. In the beginning, it would be a lot of get the world map, which was the computer program that showed exactly where we were. And I still used it through the whole mission, but I was getting better and better at just looking out and knowing exactly where we were, or at least close to where we were, just by what I was seeing in the colors I was seeing.
That's so cool. That's really, really cool. So, there was another question I had about that I forgot, but, so the oceans, the mountains, the colors, what was one thing that you went, oh, by the way, I don't know if you've ever heard of this, de space.
I have heard of it.
Have you ever smelled it?
I have not smelled it. What does it smell like?
They say it smells like the space station and space and stuff. And
the space station, or they're external, like what we smell when we open the vestibule after a.
Good question. I'll have to read it. But yeah.
Does it smell like welding?
I mean, there's a little welding in it. Yeah. It's certainly not something I want to. Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Especially the after smell. Like kind of a metallic, slightly burned almost something.
Yes, that smell is what we would say after a spacewalk when the crew lock portion of the airlock had been exposed to vacuum during the whole spacewalk, and the crew comes back in, and then when we open the hatch to the main part of the space station, we would definitely smell that smell. And I always thought it was kind of like a welding smell, and I think it's just that burning metal, or people have different ways to describe it.
Yeah. I wonder if it's hydrogen fusing.
Well, that's the thing. I don't. Well, I can't help but wonder: is it a smell? Is it the actual smell that's in space, or is it like an off gassing from the metal of the space station?
Good question. Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah. So what was something like? What was one of the more kind of surprising little things about, like, I don't know, another one of those inside baseball things about, like, I don't know, riding in the space shuttle or being on the space station that people don't ask about and that you don't think to tell people about. Anything come to mind?
I'm just bad at questions like this.
These are bad questions. I'm being a terrible host. Yeah.
There could be so many things that I could say that I can't think of one thing. There are probably so many things that would answer that question.
How about how it feels to have your hair floating? Because you've got long hair, and that picture of you in the cupola, with your hair floating. And my son watches, I don't remember her name, but a dark-haired woman who reads the stories, she does stories from space. And I don't know if other astronauts do that, but Johnny watches that, and she's got dark curly hair, and it seems like it's almost alive. It's like it's forcing itself. Like, I didn't realize that long hair would like push out like that. Why? It
does. And my speculation is that it just kind of goes in the direction that it's growing out of the follicle. And that's where it goes.
Yeah.
And it was very easy to keep it out of my face because it would just float up above.
Poof. Yeah. That's interesting.
And it, there were times when I felt I needed to put it in a ponytail or a bun just because of equipment around. But in general, I liked to just let it go. And I almost forgot it's there, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course, you need to be conscientious about your crewmates and make sure that you're not getting a face full of hair for them, which that's sometimes funny. In space, it's easy to forget that you really have that 3-dimension space. What happens a lot, we'll lose something, like if you drop a screwdriver and you can't find it, and we'll be doing this. You look to the right all the way back, and you look to the left all the way back, and it's right behind you. You can't see it when you're looking. And it's just floating right there. That's
funny. Is there static electricity on the space? Like, do you ever get that, like, touch somebody and it goes zap, or your hair?
No, never got
I would imagine not. I don't think that would be a good thing. But, well, thanks for answering all my silly questions.
No, I like silly questions. It's just, I'm not good at answering questions that aren't direct. where I have to come up with my own imagination of what I should say.
Well, so what about, I think the other thing that I think about pretty often is how much it's easy for me to say, I want to be an astronaut, go, I want to do what you do. But I don't think that I think about enough what it really would be like, what a tough decision it would be to say, I'm going to go be on the space station for 6 months and leave my child, and a lot like the military, right. Going to deploy and won't see my family. And, there's some risks and things like that. And I think that, we talked about this a little bit, but I'd like to hear a little bit more, if you don't mind, about how much you train. Cause, I've been corresponding with astronauts and they'll be like, okay, we're going to go into training. And then they're just gone because it's intense for a while. You said you were gone for 5 months, right? That one intense training.
Yeah. It's, training for space station. We do, of course, most of our training in the US, but then we also go to Japan to do some training on the Japanese segment or the Japanese module. We go to Europe and do some training there in Cologne, Germany. We go to Russia. That's where we spent the most time. And I did because I rode a Russian spacecraft to orbit. And so that's why I spent more time in Russia than some of the crews now who are now riding Dragon won't spend as much time in Russia. And, excuse me.
No worries.
And so the Russia trips were quite lengthy, but even here, while we're training for a flight, oftentimes it is a normal work day, which is nice because then we can have evenings with family and that sort of thing. But there are times when we need to go do a T-38 flight, either on a weekend or at night, or we need to be in a sim, that's a long sim. And the simulations don't train just the astronauts, it's training for Mission Control Center as well.
Yeah.
And those can be long involved processes because we're training a whole segment of a flight, several hours long. And then spacewalk training, of course, in the neutral buoyancy lab, that is a long day. We'll be under the water for 6 hours, and that doesn't count the time of getting prepped and briefing and getting suited up and then the debrief. Yeah. So those can be really long days. But we do, and then we learn about every system of the space station. We learn about, we have to do maintenance on the space station. We do payloads, the science payloads, and that part of it, we're doing work for, and you alluded to this before, that we're doing the work, the hands-on work on orbit, but it's not our work. It's somebody else's work. The science is not my science. The science is scientists around the world, investigators around the world are doing these and counting on us to do a good job at it. So we get the training on that, the training on the maintenance, because this is engineers on the ground, their equipment. We need to keep their equipment running.
Yeah.
So the training can be, and a lot of the important training, like the emergency training, what we need to do if there's a fire or a depressurization or some toxic chemical is released in there. That training we do over and over. It has to be, we don't have time often to get out a procedure and read through it. Initially, you have to be able to do things on your feet and quickly.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember this, but one of your colleagues told me that I needed to remember that the first astronauts were trained monkeys. And I think that one takeaway that I get from that is that what's visible to anybody else about what I do or what you do or what somebody else does or what they do, what's visible to everybody else is just, the proverbial tip of the iceberg. It's just this little teeny bit of the entire thing that goes into that. And I think that there are a lot of people that see the entrepreneurial journey and think, oh, that looks like a lot of fun. I want to be Elon Musk, and okay, well, like now maybe, but how about all those difficult moments and those times when he really didn't know
Right.
if it was going to work or not, and all the other entrepreneurs, that are out there that whole aspect of whatever it is you want to do, like there's just going to be some hard times, and to want to do it enough to make it through those hard times. I always tell people it's easy to be an overnight success when you've been doing something for 10 years.
Yes.
And so, what is it you want to do for 10 years? What would you even be willing to do for 10 years? It's one of the reasons there's no magic like fairy dust is going to fall on you and make you successful if you do what you love. What's going to happen, why that matters, is because if you do what you love, you'll do it long enough that you could succeed. You could succeed, right?
That's right. I get that question a lot from people who want to be astronauts. What should I study? Where should I go to school? Should I join the military? Should I become a doctor? Should I study engineering? And what I tell everybody is there's a minimum requirement. You have some sort of STEM related bachelor's degree or master's, well, preferably master's. I think now actually master's might be a requirement. But otherwise do what you enjoy, because if I tell you, well, what worked for me, I went to the University of North Dakota and I studied mechanical engineering. And then I went and after my bachelor's, I got my master's and my PhD. And then I worked at JSC in Houston, and that worked for me. But will that work for you? Probably not. And what you need to pick is something that you love. So there's a couple things. One, you will be really good at it because you love it. And you will show the passion in it that you need. And two, if you don't become an astronaut, you will be doing something you love.
Yes.
For the rest of your life, instead of going into mechanical engineering because Karen did. And I don't even like engineering. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
I mean, not me. Somebody picks it who doesn't like it just because they think that's the path they should take.
Yeah.
Then, the chance of becoming an astronaut is really slim. And so people need to be doing something that they enjoy. And that's probably similar for, the chance of becoming a millionaire is really slim. And so do something you enjoy. And
it's what I tell people all the time about TED Talks, If you want, just go do something TED worthy, create a great TED like talk and give it anywhere. Who cares?
Yeah.
Well, Karen, I know we're coming up on an hour here, and I want to thank you for being so generous and letting me just, kind of flip flop all over here with all this fun stuff that I've wanted to ask an astronaut. And so, is there anything that you'd like to say before we wrap up? Anything,
It's always so fun to talk to you. It's always so easy to talk to you. So I've enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's fun it's a lot of times getting these kind of conversations. It allows me to think back to things, like we said, I've been retired from NASA for a year. So it's fun to go back and think about the things that I have done. Sometimes I forget really how big the things I've done are. Especially the last year living, being at home mostly. With my son and just being mom and trying to be artist. And sometimes I forget, wow, I flew to space twice. I did some pretty cool things. And so it's fun to sit back and talk about those things sometimes.
So let me just use that as a prompt for everybody, anybody listening right now, you, Karen, me, anybody. Okay. Get your imaginary carabiner in your imaginary climbing gear. It's all hooked up, right? And clip that baby in, right? Okay. You're all clipped in. We're solid, he's not going to fall. Okay. Now turn around and look back at how far you've come. Just look back for 1 minute here and think about, for you, Karen, 7, 8 years old, I want to be an astronaut. You kept going with that when so many of us, it was a fad, it was a passing phase. You kept going, right? And whatever it is you did, look back right now for just a minute and acknowledge yourself for how far you've come. Because here's the thing. If we don't do that often enough, I think our spirit rebels, because this mountain that we're all climbing, anybody listening to this right now, that mountain has no top. It's just up, 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 up. And that's awesome. And that's great. And that's challenging. And we got to clip in once in a while or our soul's going to rebel, So look back, acknowledge yourself for how far you've come. And Karen, thank you for sharing the view from space with us today and the view from all those other perspectives that you've got. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure for sure.
Cool. All right. Thank you. And thank you all for joining us for speaklikealeader.show. We'll see you next time. Take care. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.